There comes a moment in every woman's life, especially after 40, when you look at a man you once trusted, once admired, once believed in, and suddenly realize he is not the man you thought he was. It doesn't hit you all at once. It doesn't come like a storm. It comes quietly, slowly, in small moments that feel insignificant at first. A forgotten promise here, an insensitive comment there, a moment when he should have shown up but didn't. And then another, and another, until those small moments create a pattern you can no longer ignore. Women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond understand this better than anyone, because age brings clarity. It brings vision. It brings a deeper understanding of emotional truth. You stop falling for the fantasy of potential and start observing the reality of behavior. You stop listening to what he says and start paying attention to what he shows. And sometimes, that truth is painful, because the man you believe was your partner turns out to be a stranger wearing familiarity as a mask. You remember how hopeful you once were, how much effort you put into love, how deeply you cared. You gave him understanding, patience, forgiveness, loyalty. You supported him when he struggled. You stood beside him when he was losing himself. You held his hand when he didn't even ask. And for a while, you convinced yourself that love was enough, that if you just kept giving, he would eventually give back. But then the signs began to show. Signs that whispered, then spoke, then screamed that something was wrong. He stopped putting effort. He became distant, defensive, emotionally unavailable. He talked like a partner but acted like a stranger. He remembered your mistakes more than your feelings. He made you question your worth, your voice, your needs. And the woman in you, the strong, wise, grown woman, started to see the truth. Not because you wanted to, but because you had to. Because your heart was tired. Because your peace mattered. Because your soul finally demanded answers. The truth is, a woman over 40 no longer has the energy to teach a grown man how to love her. She doesn't have the patience to raise him emotionally. She doesn't have the desire to accept half love, half effort, or half commitment. She knows what she deserves: honesty, presence, loyalty, consistency, peace. And when a man fails to offer these things, no matter how charming his words are, she feels the imbalance deeply. This intro isn't about blaming him. It's about awakening you. Because once you recognize the signs, you stop romanticizing potential and start honoring your truth. You understand that a man who repeatedly disappoints you isn't confused, he's consistent. A man who disappears in difficult moments isn't busy, he's unreliable. And a man who can't support you emotionally isn't incapable, he's unwilling. And once you see these signs clearly, you finally stop waiting for him to become someone he never intended to be. 1. He stops putting effort into the relationship. When a man stops putting effort into a relationship, it rarely happens overnight. It's a slow fade, a gradual shift that you feel long before you fully understand it. In the beginning, he was present. He initiated conversations, planned small moments, checked in on your feelings, and made you feel like you mattered. But slowly, subtly, those gestures disappear. You find yourself doing all the emotional work, sending the first message, fixing misunderstandings, keeping the connection alive. You start noticing that he shows up only when it's convenient. The dates become less thoughtful, the conversations become shorter, and the emotional presence that once felt warm now feels distant. You try to justify it. Maybe he's stressed, tired, distracted, but a deeper part of you knows effort isn't about energy. It's about priority. And when someone truly loves you, you don't have to beg to be considered. You notice that you're initiating everything: the plans, the apologies, the affection. You're the glue, and is barely holding the other end. The painful truth: a relationship can't survive on one-sided effort. When a man withdraws emotionally, his silence becomes louder than any argument. He may not say he's pulling away, but you feel it in the pauses, the excuses, the lack of interest. You start recognizing that the we has quietly turned into you. You're carrying the emotional weight while he's just along for the ride. And in your 40s, 50s, or beyond, you understand something younger women often learn later. Effort is love. Not gifts, not promises, not vague words, consistent effort. If he stops trying, it means he stopped valuing what he once fought for. This sign alone can reveal far more than he's willing to admit. 2. He only shows love when it benefits him. A man who loves you genuinely shows his care consistently, not selectively. But when he only expresses affection when it benefits him, his behavior becomes transactional, not emotional. He gives compliments when he wants something. He acts gentle when he knows he needs forgiveness. He suddenly becomes thoughtful when he senses you're slipping away. It's not love, it's strategy. You begin to notice a pattern. His affection spikes when he needs your support, attention, or validation. The moment his needs are met, he retreats again. It's like you're part of a cycle where your worth depends on how useful you are at the moment. Maybe he becomes sweet when he needs financial help, emotional comfort, or physical closeness. But when you need him, he becomes cold, distracted, or irritated. This inconsistency is emotionally draining. You start feeling like you're in a performance, constantly proving yourself to receive the bare minimum. When love is conditional, it teaches you to shrink yourself, to stay quiet, to avoid conflict, to give endlessly while receiving almost nothing in return. Women over 40 see this pattern with clarity because experience sharpens instinct. You can tell when love is genuine and when it's convenient. A man who only shows affection when it serves him does not see you as a partner. He sees you as a resource. Someone who comforts him, supports him, listens to him, forgives him, and fills the emotional gaps in his life. But you deserve a man who loves because he feels it, not because he needs something. Love should never appear only when it benefits him. If he's inconsistent with affection and stable only when he's gaining something from it, then he's showing you exactly where his heart truly stands. And it's not with you. 3. He makes you feel like you're too much for wanting basic respect. One of the most painful realizations for a woman, especially after 40, is discovering that you're not too much, you are simply asking the wrong man. Respect is not an unreasonable request. Wanting clarity, communication, effort, honesty, affection, and emotional safety is not a burden. These are the foundations of a healthy relationship, yet he makes you feel guilty for expecting them. When you ask him to communicate, he says you're nagging. When you express hurt, he says you're overreacting. When you ask for consistency, he calls you demanding. When you seek reassurance, he labels you insecure. It becomes a pattern. You express a valid need, and he flips the conversation to make you feel like the problem. This emotional manipulation makes you shrink over time. You start talking less, expressing less, expecting less. You convince yourself that silence is safer because every conversation turns into blame. But the truth is simple. A man who loves you will never make you feel wrong for wanting respect. Women 40 plus know that peace is priceless. You've lived enough life to understand that a grown man should already know how to communicate without turning everything into conflict. If he makes you feel like your standards are too high, it's because he isn't willing or capable of meeting them, not because they are unreasonable. And here's the deeper truth. You are not too much. You were simply with someone who offered too little. The moment you stop apologizing for wanting basic respect, you reclaim your power. And once you see how little he gave, you'll never again feel guilty for asking for what you always deserved. 4. He remembers everything that hurts you, but forgets what matters to you. A man who truly cares remembers the things that make your heart feel safe. Your favorite songs, your fears, your boundaries, the little details you share in passing. But a man who isn't invested holds on only to the things that give him power. Your mistakes, your sensitive spots, the words you said in pain, the moments you were vulnerable. He remembers the things that hurt you because those memories help him win arguments, shift blame, or keep control. You start noticing how he forgets the things that make you feel loved, your birthday plans, your comfort foods, the conversations where you expressed what you needed emotionally. But he remembers perfectly the day you cried in frustration, the words you said during an argument, or the time you felt insecure. That selective memory is not accidental. It's emotional imbalance. Women over 40 see through these patterns clearly. It's not that he has a bad memory. It's that he prioritizes what benefits him. When he forgets your needs but remembers your pain, it creates a silent distance. You begin feeling unseen, unheard, and emotionally unsafe. And eventually, you realize that someone who remembers your low moments more than your meaningful ones is not a partner. Here's a reminder of why emotional maturity matters. Love should make you feel safe in your vulnerability. If he uses your weaknesses as ammunition but forgets your emotional needs as if they are unimportant, then the issue is not your memory, it's his lack of intention. A man's focus reveals where his heart truly is. And when he clings to what hurts you instead of what heals you, it tells you everything you need to know about the future of that relationship. 5. He chooses convenience over commitment. A committed man shows up, not just when it's easy, not just when it fits his schedule, and not just when the relationship benefits him. Commitment requires effort, consistency, and responsibility. Things that become even more important in relationships after 40, where emotional maturity matters more than excitement. But when a man chooses convenience, he avoids anything that requires real work. You notice he's present when things are fun, simple, or comfortable. But the moment something requires emotional depth, a serious conversation, mutual decision, or accountability, he becomes distant, distracted, or unavailable. It's not that he can't commit. It's that he doesn't want to commit unless it suits him. That's the hard truth. Women in their 40s and beyond have learned one powerful lesson. You cannot build a future with a man who only shows up when it doesn't inconvenience him. He avoids defining the relationship. He avoids planning long-term. He avoids emotional discussions. He avoids responsibility. Why? Because commitment requires giving, and he prefers taking. You end up carrying the emotional weight while he enjoys the comfort you bring. You provide stability, support, companionship, yet he offers only the bare minimum. His inconsistency becomes clearer with time, and eventually, you start feeling like you're in a relationship with someone who's present in moments but absent in life. The truth is simple. If he wanted a real partnership, he'd prioritize you, not convenience. You deserve someone who chooses you consistently, not selectively. Someone who stays when it's hard, not just when it's fun. Commitment is a choice. And if he refuses to choose you fully, then he's already shown you where his loyalty lies. 6. He blames you for his own unhealed wounds. A man's past can influence him, but it should never be used as a weapon against you. When he carries unhealed trauma, unresolved childhood pain, or emotional scars from previous relationships, it can impact the way he loves. But a mature man acknowledges his wounds and works on them. An emotionally immature man does the opposite. He projects them onto you. He blames you for things you didn't do. He accuses you of intentions you never had. He overreacts to small triggers because they remind him of past hurt, not present reality. And instead of recognizing his emotional patterns, he makes you feel responsible for them. You end up walking on eggshells, trying to avoid saying or doing anything that might set him off. Women over 40 often recognize this pattern more clearly than younger women because experience teaches perspective. You begin to understand that his anger isn't really about you. It's about unresolved pain he's never confronted. Still, being blamed for wounds you didn't create becomes emotionally exhausting. You start questioning yourself, doubting your worth, and shrinking to avoid conflict. But here's the truth. You cannot heal a man who refuses to acknowledge his own wounds. You cannot carry the emotional weight of his past. You are not responsible for the pain he won't address. A healthy relationship requires accountability. A grown man should know the difference between past trauma and present love. When he blames you instead of healing himself, he isn't protecting the relationship, he's damaging it. And the moment you stop absorbing blame that was never yours, you reclaim your emotional peace. 7. He turns every conversation into a competition. A man who sees every conversation as a competition is not trying to understand you. He's trying to win. You open up about something that hurt you, and instead of acknowledging your feelings, he responds with, "Well, you did this," or "I've had it twice." It becomes a constant scorekeeping game, where your pain is dismissed because he feels the need to prove his right, stronger, or more correct. Women over 40 understand how exhausting this becomes over time. You're not trying to compete. You're trying to connect. You want mutual understanding, emotional intimacy, and honest communication. But instead, you find yourself in a verbal tug-of-war where your feelings don't matter unless they place him above you. He interrupts to correct you. He argues over the smallest details. He treats discussions like debates he must win at any cost. This dynamic slowly kills emotional safety. You stop expressing yourself because every conversation turns into a battlefield. You walk on eggshells, fearing his reactions. You suppress your feelings to avoid conflict. What you wanted was a partner. What you ended up with feels more like a rival. A relationship is not a competition. It's a partnership. When a man competes with you, it reveals his insecurity. It shows he values being right more than being close. And as women mature emotionally, they realize something powerful. Peace matters more than pride. If he can't discuss things without turning them into a power struggle, then he's not offering you a relationship. He's offering you a constant fight you never signed up for. 8. He gets defensive instead of getting better. A man who gets defensive every time you express a concern is showing you that growth is not his priority. When you say something hurt you, he takes it as a personal attack. When you point out a repeated behavior, he shifts the blame. When you try to communicate openly, he shuts down, gets angry, or accuses you of exaggerating. This reaction doesn't come from strength. It comes from insecurity. Mature men listen. They reflect. They adjust. But a defensive man sees feedback as a threat to his ego, so he reacts with denial instead of accountability. It becomes a cycle. You express a need, he gets offended, you end up comforting him, and your original concern never gets solved. Women over 40 know how emotionally draining this becomes. You start doubting whether you should speak up at all. You convince yourself to stay silent to keep the peace, even though silence slowly breaks your spirit. You learn to swallow your feelings, not because you're wrong, but because he refuses to look inward. But here's the truth. A man who loves you will care about how you feel. A man who respects you will listen without turning it into a fight. And a man who wants to grow will see your feedback as guidance, not criticism. When he gets defensive instead of getting better, he's choosing comfort over growth, and that choice reveals how committed he truly is. You deserve someone who can handle emotional responsibility, not someone who makes you feel guilty for wanting a healthier relationship. 9. He wants your support, but doesn't offer his. One of the clearest signs he's not the man you thought he was is when he expects unwavering support, but offers almost none in return. You show up for him emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even financially. You comfort him through setbacks, reassure him during insecurity, and celebrate his victories as if they're your own. But when you need him, truly need him, he becomes distant, dismissive, or unavailable. Women over 40 have learned how essential emotional reciprocity is. Support isn't just physical presence. It's effort, empathy, and consistency. But with him, the dynamic feels one-sided. When he's stressed, you listen. When he's overwhelmed, you help. When he's hurting, you soften. But when you're going through the same, he says things like, "You'll be fine," or "You're overthinking," or "I can't deal with this right now." This imbalance reveals a painful truth. He loves how you make him feel, but he doesn't consider how he makes you feel. He enjoys the comfort you provide but doesn't think to give it back. You end up becoming his emotional anchor while floating alone during your own storms. Support in a relationship is mutual. It's shared. It's balanced. And when a man constantly takes without giving, it becomes emotional exhaustion disguised as love. A grown woman eventually realizes she deserves not just a supporter but a partner, someone who shows up the same way she does. A relationship cannot thrive when one person gives their all and the other contributes nothing but expectations. You deserve someone who supports you with the same dedication, sincerity, and love that you offer so naturally. 10. He sees your strength as a threat, not a blessing. A strong woman is an asset, but to an insecure man, she feels like a mirror reflecting everything he refuses to face. When you show independence, he feels overshadowed. When you make good decisions, he feels inferior. When you remain calm during chaos, he feels exposed. Instead of celebrating your strength, he competes with it. Instead of admiring your resilience, he resents it. Women over 40 have lived long enough to build emotional, financial, and mental strength. You've survived heartbreak, responsibilities, challenges, and life lessons that shaped you into a powerful woman. But a man who lacks inner confidence doesn't see your strength as something beautiful. He sees it as a threat to his fragile ego. He may belittle your achievements, minimize your experiences, or mock your confidence. He may make comments like, "You think you know everything," or "You're acting too independent." Instead of being proud of you, he tries to pull you down so he can feel taller. This is not love. It's competition disguised as partnership. A mature man sees a strong woman as a blessing. He appreciates her wisdom, values her independence, and stands beside her without feeling smaller. But an immature man sees her strength as a challenge he needs to defeat. He wants control, not connection. Eventually, you realize something powerful. A man who feels threatened by your strength was never strong enough to love you in the first place. 11. He makes promises only to break them quietly. A man's word means nothing if his actions don't follow. When he makes promises he never keeps, he's showing you who he truly is, someone who speaks beautifully but delivers nothing. At first, he promises change. He promises effort. He promises to do better, communicate more, show up more, love deeper. And maybe you believe him, because his words sound sincere. But then days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and you notice a painful pattern. Every promise fades the moment the conversation ends. He becomes consistent at only one thing: inconsistency. He apologizes without changing. He reassures without acting. He comforts without committing. Women over 40 understand the difference between empty words and genuine intention. You've lived enough life to recognize when someone is giving you excuses wrapped in pretty language. Broken promises hurt not because of what he didn't do, but because of what they reveal. You weren't important enough for him to follow through. You begin to carry the disappointment alone. You stop expecting anything because expecting only leads to hurt. You start accepting less, not because you want less, but because he never gives more. But here's the truth. A man who keeps breaking promises isn't forgetful. He's comfortable. He knows you will forgive. He knows you will adjust. He knows you will stay. Until one day, you don't. 12. He stops showing up when you need him most. The true test of love is not how someone acts when life is easy. It's how they show up when life gets hard. When you're going through stress, grief, illness, or emotional exhaustion, the man who truly loves you becomes your safe place. But when he stops showing up during your hardest moments, he reveals exactly where you fall on his priority list. Maybe you needed comfort, but he was busy. Maybe you needed reassurance, but he was tired. Maybe you needed support, but he was in a mood. Maybe you needed presence, but he offered excuses. This kind of absence is louder than silence. Women over 40 understand how deeply this cuts because emotional reliability becomes the foundation of mature love. You don't want grand gestures. You want a partner who stands beside you when life shakes. But he disappears when you're vulnerable, reappearing only when the storm has passed and the emotional labor is done. You begin to feel alone even while being in a relationship. You start relying on yourself, not by choice, but by necessity. You cry behind closed doors. You handle crises alone. You comfort yourself because you know he won't. The truth is painful but liberating. A man who loves you won't vanish when you need him. A man who values you won't let you face darkness alone. Presence is love. Absence is clarity. And once you see his absence clearly, you finally understand the difference between someone who says they care and someone who actually does. 13. He talks like a partner, but acts like a stranger. Some men know exactly what to say, but never follow through. He talks like he's committed, loyal, and emotionally invested, but his actions show a completely different story. He uses partner language without partner behavior. He promises communication but avoids conversations. He talks about a future but never makes plans. He calls you my person, yet disappears when you need him. This emotional contradiction is one of the most painful signs because it keeps you confused, hopeful, and stuck in a cycle of mixed signals. Women over 40 know how powerful consistency is and how damaging inconsistency can be. When a man speaks beautifully but behaves carelessly, he creates emotional whiplash. One day he's sweet, attentive, full of affection. The next day he's cold, distant, and acting like you're asking for too much. His words make you stay, but his actions make you feel alone. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I'm misunderstood. Maybe he's stressed. Maybe I'm asking too much. But deep down, you know the truth. If he cared, his actions would match his words. A real partner shows up, not just speaks up. He makes you feel chosen through consistency, not confusion. When he acts like a stranger despite calling himself your partner, he isn't miscommunicating. He's revealing his true capacity for love. And once you see the gap between his words and actions, you stop believing fantasies and start trusting reality. 14. He gives you anxiety instead of peace. Love should feel peaceful, not chaotic. The right man brings calm, stability, and emotional safety. But when he constantly brings uncertainty, tension, or emotional discomfort, it becomes a sign that his presence is hurting more than helping. You find yourself overthinking every message, analyzing every tone, questioning every silence. Instead of feeling secure, you feel unsettled. Women over 40 deeply value peace because you've lived through enough stress to know that emotional chaos is not love. Anxiety in a relationship shows up in small ways. Waiting for his replies, fearing his reactions, walking on eggshells, and feeling responsible for his moods. You feel emotionally on edge, as if one wrong word will create conflict or coldness. The emotional toll is heavy. You lose sleep. You lose joy. You lose parts of yourself trying to maintain a relationship that should never have been this draining. Peace becomes something you remember, not something you experience. The truth? A man who genuinely loves you brings calm with his presence, not chaos. He reassures instead of confusing you. He communicates instead of disappearing. He comforts instead of triggering fear. Anxiety is not a sign of deep love. It's a sign of deep imbalance. Your nervous system reacts to his inconsistency long before your heart does. And once you realize how much of your peace you've sacrificed, you understand that no man is worth losing your emotional stability for. 15. He shows you his patterns, and you finally start believing them. People don't lie with their actions. They reveal themselves through them. Patterns are the most honest form of truth. He may apologize, promise change, or blame circumstances, but his repeated behavior tells the real story. If he is inconsistent, you will see inconsistency again. If he withdraws, he will withdraw again. If he avoids commitment, he will avoid it again. His patterns are his identity. Women over 40 understand that patterns matter more than words because life experience teaches wisdom. You stop judging a man by what he says and start judging him by what he repeatedly does. And eventually, the signs that once confused you start becoming clear. He's not unpredictable. He's consistent in the wrong ways. At first, you might have given him the benefit of the doubt. You hoped he would change. You believed his promises. You waited for improvement. But then you noticed the patterns never break. The same arguments, the same excuses, the same disappearances, the same emotional absence. And suddenly, you realize the heartbreak isn't in losing him, but in finally seeing him clearly. Patterns don't lie. They reveal emotional capacity, priorities, and character. And when a man shows you the same hurtful behavior repeatedly, it's not a mistake. It's who he chooses to be. When you finally start believing the patterns, you stop explaining them away. You stop trying to fix him. You stop waiting for potential. Instead, you choose yourself, your peace, your healing, your future. And that moment becomes the most powerful turning point of all.